Figuring out the microphone that you want for your gear is a very difficult task with all the options out there nowadays. And of course, there's always something that comes out that has a really cool specification, but everything else or the main features really fall short when it comes to choosing it. Welcome back to the Rebel Tech channel. I'm Justin, and in this video we're going to be doing a comparison between the Shure MV7X and the AT2040 by Audio-Technica. Now, as I was saying in the intro, there are specifications for this AT2040 that are very appealing, meaning the polar pattern, the Hyper Cardioid polar pattern, is one of the best ones I've heard in all of the microphones that I've covered and used in the past. The Shure MV7X has good rejection, but it is still a cardioid polar pattern, so it still has that inflated front and picks up a little bit more room noise. When it comes down to picking out the microphone, though, the AT2040, in my opinion, is, I'm not going to say it's bad. I won't say that. I will say that it's a niche market, meaning it's a tone that people have to look for. It's not something that you can just use and manipulate it however you want, or it comes out of the box the way you want. There are certain people that want this sound, want this style of microphone, like ribbon microphones, for example. Me personally, I don't like the sound of ribbon microphones. It doesn't do it for me. And tube microphones don't get me started. I mean, it's too much work. It's a pain in the butt, but they're for certain people. People love ribbon microphones. People love tube microphones, that classic sound with the tube. It's not for me. Like this, the AT2040 is for a specific person who's looking for that tone that matches their voice or gives you that sound that you're looking for. Without any further ado, let's get into the build. And I gotta say, both of these are very well built. If I was to give a upper hand, I don't have the shock mount on the AT2040. And that's because I wanted to give a more genuine example of people who just buy the microphone and don't have the 20 series shock mount. So just for an example, I'm going to tap the whole area around here. You guys let me know what you think on that one. I definitely feel that these are okay for that. Not great, but not terrible. So when it comes to the builds, like when you feel them, there's a certain feel to microphones that you feel like if it's substantial, meaning that it's got some body to it. And when you buy something, you want to actually feel like you bought something that doesn't feel cheap. And feeling cheap is a big thing for me. And a lot of people should feel that way. I don't want to say should feel that way, but a lot of people should have that in their mind and be conscious about it and be aware. It's okay to not care about it, but be aware that it's a thing. Just like cardioid polar patterns or hypercardioid polar patterns, you should be aware of what is available and what is the difference between one and the other. So when I feel the Shure MV7X, it feels good. But when you compare it to something more hefty, like a AT2040, it's lacking, comparatively speaking. So the build I'm going to give towards the AT2040 only for the reason that I can put the shock mount on this. If it wasn't for the shock mount, I would definitely give it to the Shure MV7X. Now, let's move on to some Techy Talk, where I talk about the specs, the tech, and everything that goes into them electronically, technologically, and I'll leave up a graphic of all the tech and specs, and then I'm going to point out some of my favorite ones and things that stand out. And of course, at the end of that, we're going to get into the frequency response. So Like I was saying before, the first thing that stands out is the cardioid polar pattern versus the hyper cardioid polar pattern. This will stand out in our off-X rejection test in the untreated room and in the studio right here. You will notice the major differences in rejection of noise outside the main source right here. Next thing, the sensitivity. It's about a 2 decibel difference, so not crazy, but it's definitely something to consider with the Shure MV7X being a little less sensitive by 2 decibels. Nothing crazy, but that's what it is. And lastly, the thing that really stands out with these is the fact that their frequency responses are narrow. And I'm going to dive into the curve specifically, but for numbers' sake, the MV7 is 50 Hz to 16 kilohertz, while the AT2040 is 80 Hz to 16 kilohertz. So they have the same top end cutoff, but the AT2040 is 30 Hz cutoff more. And I feel that's a little too aggressive for a natural tone to a microphone. Now, that's generally speaking. I'm not talking about everybody. I'm talking about the general public. I'm talking about how I would like a microphone to be used and tuned and all that stuff. I really do hope that microphone companies understand that we're more capable. I mean, of course, I'm an audio person, so maybe I'm speaking from a point of or a perspective of someone who knows what they're doing and has experience, but I do really feel that people are more than capable of figuring out EQ at its simplest form and figuring out the peripherals of audio that much easier, because there's so many tutorials out there and there's so many things going on for making presets and things like that, that it's not that hard nowadays. It used to be very difficult and the knowledge that you needed was very high, but now it's not that much, and there's so many avenues you can go down to get the answer that you want, and it's really trial and error. Everyone should have the experience, and making your content unique to you is making you a stronger content creator as well. So without getting too philosophical, let's get into the frequency response curve specifically, starting off with the low end on the Shure MV7X. We have a nice wavy low end, low cutoff right there, and it goes steadily up, not too crazy of a curve, but it's steadily up into the low mids and into the mids. On the AT2040, it's on the chart, it says 20 to 20, but from the numbers and from the tone, you notice that they're gone. I mean, not necessarily gone, but they're essentially gone. And I think the frequency response is a little misleading with that, because the curve is not as steep as the tone portrays the sound, at least in my voice. If you feel differently, let me know. Then starts to flatten out, which is cool. It starts to flatten out and little belly there in the midsection as we move into the midsection. So moving on to the midsection with the AT2040, it's fairly flat, like a little bit of a belly there, but not too crazy. It's scooped out tastefully, right below 0 decibels. On the MV7X, it has, as I've said in a bunch of videos now, a wave that goes steadily up, and it's really not terrible, but as far as a curve and looking at it, not considering the tone, which is difficult, but if you look at it on a chart, like if you were someone who's just looking to get the microphone and you saw the frequency response curve, for spoken word, this is difficult to say, oh, is that okay? Is that going to be all right? Because usually flat is a little better. But you could see and you could hear that the flat midsection or a flatter midsection doesn't necessarily mean better. AT2040, Shure MV7X. You probably get my point, and you'll get it throughout these tests that we do throughout the video. Now, lastly, with the Shure MV7X on the high end, it's tastefully tuned, stops at 16, and I really do like the high end on this. To be honest, the low end is good, mid and the high end I like. With the AT2040, it's got a presence boost there right around like 5K or 3K, something like that. And then it dips right off. I'm just meh on it. It's just not for me. And if you know me and you know my personal preference, the Shure MV7X is the one who's taking the frequency response section because, I don't know, it's better in the sense that I like the way that the low end is and the high end is. With this, it's misleading. And I am putting my bias of knowing the tone in there, but it's kind of hard to not do that. Let me know what you think down in the comments about the frequency response as a curve. And if you could just differentiate between the curve and the tone, even better. Now let's get into some off-X rejection, but first, let's do a noise test right now. All right, so you may have heard the dehumidifier in the other room, and my little mini fridge over here is going off, so this could be something that you have to deal with as well. Now, we're going to do off-X rejection, and this is going to be a major test with the comparison between these two, and could be the defining factor for you in making a decision on the microphone. All right, so weird angle, I know. I hear your comments and future comments and everything like that. I know what people are going to say. Maybe no one says anything. I don't know. Normally, I've been talking about 2-3 inches away. Now I'm going to do a distance test. All right, about 2-3 feet away from the fronts of the microphone. This is going to be your distance test in front of the microphones in the Rebel Tech studio. All right. Off-X rejection, 90-degree test on the AT2040 side. Speaking towards a wall with a lot of stuff on it. Could be relatable to a room like yours because most people don't have treatment on the walls, but they do have a lot of stuff, which kind of acts like some sort of treatment. It's not perfect, but it is something. Now, for this specific test, let's do the sweet spot, which is 120 to 150 degrees, right about here. And you're going to notice a major difference in the AT2040, maybe a little bit in the Shure MV7, but it's one of those things that this is where the Hyper Cardioid and Super Cardioid polar patterns shine in this specific spot. So if you're looking to reduce background noise, and the major noise that you're looking for, that you notice, should go in this angle. All right, 180-degree test about 2 feet away from the rears of the microphones. And keep in mind, the Hyper Cardioid on the 2040 side here will be a little bit of pickup. It's traditionally known to have a little bit of pickup on the rear because it's a byproduct of having a hypercardioid polar pattern. But I will say that the AT2040 definitely has better rejection of the rear than I've ever seen in any other hyper, super, or whatever. The Shure MV7X definitely has some rejection in the back because it's a cardioid, because it's heart shape and it picks up in the front, a little bit on those corners, and then starts to reject as you move back. Not forward, back. You know what I'm talking about. I've been talking a lot. Let's go to the booth and talk some more so I could lose my mind there. Okay, so we're in the booth right now with the Shure MV7X and the AT2040. And this is definitely an interesting comparison, mostly because of the off-axis stuff, but that midness, yes, that midness of the AT2040 is definitely one of those that I find interesting, to say it nicely. It's definitely obviously I'm listening to the Shure MV7X right now, but it's really tough to figure it out because I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I noticed that. Let's go to the 2040 because it makes more sense to me when I'm listening to it. A little more volume there on the gain. Yeah, it's so weird because there are times where I hear this and it's way too mid-forward and muddy, but now I'm listening to it right now and it's not bad. It's not as bad as I remember it, and I keep saying this. This microphone drives me crazy. I hear it differently every time, and this one definitely has that airiness in the breaths. Like if you listen to the breaths, that's where you hear it. And if you go to the MV7X, you notice that it's definitely a airy kind of microphone, and you could dampen some of it with some EQ. And both of these, they're very similar in that sense of the airiness and the presence. All right, so let's do a plosive test to get that out of the way, and so I don't forget. MV7X. Ugh. AT2040. Not terrible. When you compare it, it's definitely something that you notice. And I'm listening to it now, and now it's more mid-heavy. I don't know what it is. I literally didn't move that much. I don't know what it is. Maybe my ears are popping or something like that. So yeah, the 2040 now is it sounds mid-forward, and I don't know what it is. It was sounding okay before. Let's go back to the Shure MV7X. And you have that dark tone. The more and more I'm listening to this, and when I do comparisons, I listen to them a lot more. And I try to listen to it a lot at the beginning when I first cover it. But when I do comparisons, I hear different sources, and it definitely comes out more as what it's supposed to sound like because I'm comparing it to other things, and it makes it more unique and gives it more of a kind of like a log in my head of this is how this microphone sounds. And it's definitely becoming that darker tone with some nice presence in the high end. Maybe the mids are a little bit off, but you could fix a little bit in EQ. It takes a little bit more work because of the waviness, but you could do it. And lastly, the 2040 here. And now it's, I don't know. I listened to it so many times, and I've listened to it a lot over the last couple months of owning it, and I don't know what it is. I get a little closer, and it's a very strange microphone, very elusive. It's dodging at my every move, and I don't even know what to do with it anymore. But I know where it's going to shine, and it's going to be the Untreated room, and it definitely shined in the off-X rejection we just did, but Untreated room is where it's going to be. So let's go to the Untreated room and give you a more relative environment for you guys. All right, so Untreated room, AT2040, and the Shure MV7X. This is my old bedroom, a area rug over a wood floor, about a 10 by 10 room, 8-9 foot ceiling. I can't remember what it is. And now we're going to do a distance test and off-axis rejection. So I'm talking about like 2-3 inches away from the fronts of the microphones right now. And this is roughly a distance that you would be at, probably a little closer, more like 1 to 2 inches, because they are broadcast, and then because they are dynamic, you would be this close. Backing up about a foot away from the fronts of the microphones, this is what it's going to sound like in a untreated room. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the room, but for the most part, this is untreated. This is probably really relative to people with their bedroom or the setup that they may have at home. All right, 90-degree test on the AT2040 side. This is what it's going to sound like with your off-axis rejection. I'm speaking towards a wall with some windows so that there could be some reflections and all stuff like that. Remember, cardioid on the Shure and Hyper Cardioid on the AT2040. Now, moving into the sweet spot, roughly 120 to 150 degrees. This was going to sound like in the off-axis rejection in the untreated room. Remember, the hypercardioid has a bit of a extra rejection in that area. And let's angle these a little bit better. So this is more accurate to that in the section where it's the sweet spot, as they call it. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do 180 degrees where the hyper has a little bit more pickup. Lastly, 180-degree test about 2 feet away from the back of the microphones. And this is what it's going to sound like in the untreated room. You're probably going to hear some reflection off those walls over there, and probably a decent amount of rejection in the back, especially on the Shure MV7X, and the 2040 might have some pickup because of the hypercardioid polar pattern. All right, so let me know what you think about the tests and how they went. And now we're going to go to the studio and see how they were after I listened to it and give it a good listen from in post-production, because it's much different in post-production. Okay, so I chose the Shure MV7X as my winner between this one and the AT2040. Now, this was a tough one because the major thing that made me decide on it was the tone. And the narrow tone of the AT2040 is very off-putting to me, at least on my voice. And I can only go off of my voice because it's the only example that I have. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't fit for other people. Certain people, it definitely fits their tone, it fits their style, it fits whatever they're looking for. Also, the fact that there is a lot of stuff going on about the AT2040 that the Shure MV7X does not have, which the Hyper Cardioid polar pattern certainly is a great feature for that. But I will say that it wasn't as drastic of a difference between these two with the off-axis rejection. Certain things here and there. The studio was pretty good with the off-axis rejection on both of them, which made sense. And the untreated room wasn't drastic enough to make me think, oh, this is going to change my mind on which one that I want. It make me overlook the tone of the microphone. Granted, the price, you got to consider that as well. It's like a $50 to $75 difference. In my opinion, it's worth the extra bit of cash to get the Shure MV7X. I feel like the noise difference is much better, meaning that noise test that we did. And I don't know. I just like the way that this microphone is put together overall. And the tone is the defining factor. It came down to the tone. And it should really come down to the tone always. I mean, I know I'm a bit of a baby when it comes to like the ZDM1. But, I mean, you saw that one won in that comparison between the Shure MV7X and the ZDM1. But in this case, the build quality was pretty on par. Like I said, I give a little edge to the AT2040 in that department. With the frequency response, I'm leaning towards the Shure MV7X, as I said. And it was a tough one. But I keep coming back to it, the tone. The booth test was the thing that really got me to decide on the Shure MV7X as my preferred microphone between these two. And of course, we're going to do a big budget broadcast battle again sometime in the future, hopefully before the summer, but depends on if anything else comes out between now and then, and also what happens with me in life. I know I'll continue to make videos, but how frequently I will do that and how fast that topic will come up, I don't know yet. But it will come out eventually. Sometime this year, I could tell you that. If I was to guess, if I'm a bet man, I'd bet that probably in the summer. So look forward to another budget broadcast battle with probably 5, maybe even 6 microphones compared to the 4 that we did before. So if you're interested in that, not including this one, I'll leave a link in the description, and you could go check out the microphone playlist that this is a part of. And yeah, so the Shure MV7X, my preferred microphone between this and the AT2040. Does not mean that one is necessarily better than the other, but it's my preferred choice. So, that all being said, thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoyed it. If you liked the video, please hit the like button down below. It'd be greatly appreciated. Helps this video, helps this channel, the whole YouTube algorithm thing. It certainly helps, so please leave a like. And if you like my vibe around here and everything going on, please consider subscribing. It's a growing community. We are well on our way to 1,500 subscribers. Hopefully get in there before the springtime, and not necessarily meaning that spring means something else is going to happen, but I have my goals. I have my projections of what I think I want this channel to get to. So, if you have any questions, comments, or anything whatsoever, leave it down in the comments section. If you want to talk to me or more directly and things like that, I will start streaming again eventually, but the Discord is up. You could go check that out as well, where we could do some file sharing if you need some help with some editing or EQ or whatever it is. Go check that out, and if you have any questions, there's a bunch of people in there, bunch meaning over 10, so that's cool. So join that cool community. The rules are just be nice, basically don't be a dick. Those are the only rules. That's all. And that's all I got for you. Until next time, take care, and I'll see you in the next video.